Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Diaz-Balart.
Mr. Speaker, precisely because issues like these are so important, need to be discussed, that's why we have made them in order in the Rules Committee for discussion. This time I yield 3 minutes to Mr. Paul.
Gentleman from Texas for 3 minutes.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to call attention to something in the committee report that I consider an error, and I would like to make a suggestion so that it might not occur again. This particular legislation, not the rule as much as the legislation, I'm not in support of for various reasons. One, I think the odds are very slim that it's going to do a whole lot of good. I concede it's very well intended. I'm a physician. I can't think of anything better than to wipe out AIDS in Africa or in the United States for that matter. But $15 billion going to Africa on a questionable program bothers me because we at the same time are cutting benefits to our veterans, and also the elderly have a hard time getting medical care here. So there's a practical argument against it. Too much of the bill, and I notice in the amendments there's a lot of social engineering going on in here, and I think if we are to do any social engineering or social suggestions, it ought to be here, and that we ought not to be naive enough to believe that we can change habits that occur in Africa. But the point I want to bring out is the authority for doing programs like this. And we have a rule in the House that we have to cite the authority, and the committee report cites the authority as a very important section of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, because literally we, the Congress, get our marching orders from Article 1, Section 8. And that says the Constitution relating to making all laws necessary and proper for carrying into execution powers vested by the Constitution. Well, that's where the shortcoming comes, because if you go and read the Constitution, it says at the end of Article 1, Section 8, it says to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. Therefore, the necessary and proper clause is explicitly designed to give the authority to write the laws for the foregoing powers. And believe me, you will not find any authority in Article 1, Section 8 for dealing with medical care problems in Africa. And you know, I find it interesting here because quite often one side of the aisle, when they don't like legislation, will use my argument in this case. And other times it's the other side of the aisle. So everybody makes my argument one time or the other. But my suggestion is that if the Constitution means anything, and if Article 1, Section 8 means anything, it ought to be applied across the board, or we ought to change the Constitution and say, this is a mandate from the American people that we have this missionary work to do in Africa. But most likely, nobody's going to propose a change in the Constitution. Most likely, the Constitution would be changed. So what do? We choose to ignore the Constitution when we feel like it, therefore reducing the Constitution to something that has very little value anymore. Thank you.
Gentleman from Florida, Mr. Hastings.